The period from 4th to 10th century Common Era is the period of proliferation of city culture in India. Well, as usual, there were wars, there were problems, but the culture itself reached its juicy climax at that time. The most beautiful temples in central India, the Khajuraho temples, are approximately built in that very period. Like European Rococo, the culture like this cannot be the product of times of decay. This is made out of abundance. At that period, several powerful states appeared in the south of India. In particular, there was the state ruled by Chola dynasty in the center with Mamallapuram. It's one of the top sightseeing places on the Indian coastline. Huge and exquisitely made temples are right near the seashore. So, at that period, the South and East India was gathered under the rule of one single powerful state, which, as it should, started the cultural expansion or even colonization of Southeast Asia, as depicted on the map. So first was Sri Lanka, then Indonesia, then Thailand, then Vietnam, China, and so on. Well, you might have traveled one of these countries. For instance, you traveled Thailand. You come to Thailand and what do you see here? You face Buddhism, but for example in Thai, Arun Savat is good morning. But even here we see Sanskrit roots straight away. Aruna is the charioteer of the god of dawn. Ratri Savat, good night. Ratri is the Vedic goddess of night. So even within the language we see the Sanskrit roots. When we come to Java or to Bali, we see the usual Hindu temples. But it's not this modern Hinduism, it's that early Hinduism. We come to Vietnam, for example to Nang Hai, and what is the main sightseeing place? The Hindu temple of 10th century. We come to Angkor Wat and we see Shiva Lingams. So where has all this come from? That came from expansion of Tamil state. And with this cultural expansion there was an expansion of yoga. Yoga came to all the countries where the Tamil sailors came to. Thai yoga. These pictures are made in Wat Po temple, near the royal palace of Thailand. This is the temple of massage, but the depictions are very ancient. Note that this is not massage, this is self-massage. And these are clearly yogic exercises. Moreover, as you see on the left slide, the yogin standing in some very complex asana also performs some complex bandha, holding the ribs. Of course, if we look at Thai yoga, it's a different yoga. It's more soft, more sweet, more lazy. Actually, it's very hard to push yourself in Thailand, but it's the same yoga in its essence. There also exists Vietnamese yoga called something like Deong, Korean yoga called Dang Hak, Chinese yoga San Dao. Well, actually half of Taoist practices are same to yogic. I didn't witness Indonesian yoga personally. Well, it was very reformed by the Dutch, and what we see now there is the European yoga, actually. In Malaysia we see Hindu temples and Hindu tradition, so in some form there should be a Hindu yoga. So we see lots of side branches of this South Indian tradition. And then yoga went to Tibet. And what is the main difference about practicing in Tibet? Well, it's cold in Tibet. That's why Hatha yoga differs in Tibet significantly. The main difference is lots of kneading exercises, a very powerful load on joints, obvious borrowings from China, lots of dynamics, and much simpler asanas. One thing is to make asanas somewhere in the Mumbai region, where it's hot by itself and everything is stretching perfectly, and the other thing is to practice asanas somewhere in a Tibetan cave, where it's actually really cold. And Tibetans went the other way, the psychopractical way. These yogas were developed under the auspices of Buddhism. The quintessence of these practices are the 6 yogas of Naropa, or the 6 doctrines of Naropa. There is a long and interesting history how Naropa and Tilopa practiced yoga, but it's the different story. These yogas are the yoga tummo, the yoga of inner heat. The practice of drying wet sheets in the cold is derived from that yoga. So actually this is the yoga of controlling the bioenergies. The yoga of illusory body, the yoga of clear light or radiant light, the yoga of the dream state, the yoga of the intermediate state. This is well known through the Bardo Theodol, Bardo Yoga, and the yoga of transference of consciousness For now, I will not dig deeper in each of these concepts. The essence of all these doctrines was to reinforce the feeling of your self-consciousness to such an extent that you will not lose your awareness when you transfer your consciousness from one body to the other. The fifth yoga, the Bardha yoga, means the yoga of transference of the consciousness. It was said already in Bhagavad Gita that like the human changes his clothes from old ones to new ones, same does the soul, and it changes the body from the old one to the new. So the immortality is impossible, but why do we need it when we can be immortal intellectually? If we can move from one body to the other without losing the unity of the stream of consciousness. And what is the obstacle to this transference? The effects which destroy our subtle body. That's why Tibetans went the way of reinforcing and strengthening the subtle bodies. Their reincarnation, the Tulku tradition of the monks reborn in the same monastery, life after life, is based on this very yogas. And what is actually necessary for this? What is necessary for the human to become self-conscious in the moment of death? He has to become self-conscious while he is alive. If during your lifetime you don't control your consciousness and it's scattered all around, then in the situation when you will lose your physical body, you will be even more or less conscious. And after the death you don't become smarter, you become more stupid. Tibetans compared this state with the dream state. Can you control yourself while dreaming? If yes, then you're conscious enough. If no, then in Bardo state you will lose any kind of control. And doctrines of Naropa are the methods to gaining this conscious enough state. And back in India, in this very period, there appears an idea of different styles, the doctrines of yoga. And here we see the split of the whole yoga into Hatha yoga, Laya yoga, Raja yoga, and so on. The very term Hatha appeared in the medieval period, and the most widespread misunderstanding about this term is that Ha means the sun and Tha means the moon. This is nonsense. There is the Sanskrit root Hath, which means to be hard, stiff, tough. As my teacher of Sanskrit explained to me, its meaning when, for example, your child asks something from you and you understand that it's bad for him and you don't give it to him, then this is to be stiff and hard in the sense of Hatha. So in fact, Hatha yoga is the yoga of discipline of your own body. There also appeared the term Raja yoga, which is widely translated as royal yoga, which is also incorrect. Its root is not rag, but ranj, which means to be colored, and emotionally colored as well. That's why the Raja yoga is the yoga of controlling emotions, which actually is the quintessence of yoga. At that very period, about 10th century, there started the expansion of the Arabic culture to the east, and naturally there began an interaction between yoga and the Arab culture. One of the brightest products of such an interaction was the translation into Arabic language, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's actually one of the first translations of Yoga Sutras. It was performed by Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni was the famous Khwarezm scientist, astronomer and intellectual. His book was called Kitab Patanjala, namely the Book of Patanjali. And it was made in a very Arabic manner. In 186 slokas of Yoga Sutra, there was enough information for Al-Biruni to make a huge book, which was like a dialogue between the teacher and his apprentices. The students posed questions, the teacher gave some explanations, but in my understanding this book is fantastic, because as for me, nobody understood yoga as deep as Al-Biruni in his translation. And how did he translate the first significant line, the definition, yogas chitta vritti nirodha? He translated the word chitta as the Arabic word nafs, which directly corresponds to the Greek psyche, and vritti nirodha he translated as control. So according to Biruni, yoga is the control of psyche. I think that in all the later translations, nobody has said anything better than Biruni about yoga. In one of the articles in my blog, I study whether the Kitab Patanjala influences the Sufi tradition. As we know that Biruni had lots of connections with Sufi, although he wasn't one of any kind of Sufi schools. And analyzing his other book, India, I came to the conclusion that there was no influence of this kind. In fact, Biruni had made a very detailed comparison of yoga and Sufi practices. He showed lots of similarities, but by that time each of these systems was pretty much well developed. Nevertheless, the existence of similar methods is very interesting. And we must say that there were other influences of yoga to the Arabic culture. Here we can see the Arabic or Urdu text, and we see that yoga was practiced within the Islamic culture. And this again shows that yoga is no mere religious practice, and it can be practiced within any kind of religious tradition and like a standalone kind of method. And even more interesting pictures are linked to the teaching of Nathas. This picture is given by Jim Madison, who is, by the way, Baron and one of the greatest scholars of Natha tradition. He has the highest initiation into Kulu Tantric tradition, Kaula, being at the same time the Oxford professor. And here on this picture we see both Arab dervishes and yogis. The yogi's legs are bound with the Pashu rope, which allows to sit in asanas for a longer time. Moreover, Melanson proves that on this picture there are depicted Matsyendranath and Goradhanath. But here, as you see, they wear Arab and Sufi clothes, although they wear whistles, being the Nath attributes, and they wear earrings, which are the signs of highest initiates of Natha orders. So evidently yoga had deeply penetrated into the Arab and Sufi cultures and made significant influences to both of them. Moreover, according to the population census of the early 20th century, the representatives of Natha order, some of them were Muslims, some of them were Hindu, and some of them were Buddhist. So yoga is a very trans-cultural and trans-religious practice. And what happened next in India? Well, there were some tragic events. It was the Muslim conquest of India, the establishment of Great Mughal Empire. But yoga survived that period, and most of the well-known yoga texts were written at that times, namely Gheranda Samhita, Shiva Samhita, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which are the compilation of the whole yogic teaching. The stress is made on Hatha Yoga, and asanas and pranayamas are extended with the cleansing procedures, namely Shaucha, Basti, Neti, and the others, which became the important part of yoga. The yogic Upanishads were written such as Teja Bindu, Jnana Bindu, Kshurika Upanishad, and the whole yogic tradition gained some more hidden place in the alienated culture. And this is the place to end the first part of our lections, acknowledging the roots of yoga.